The string quartet played softly in the background as I adjusted my tie for the 100th time. The grand ballroom at the Four Seasons was everything my daughter had dreamed of for her wedding. Crystal chandeliers catching the late afternoon sun, white roses cascading from every surface, and 200 guests dressed in their finest attire. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for the glass of scotch. 25 years of keeping a secret, and in a few hours it would all come crashing down. I knew this day would come eventually. I just never imagined it would be at Emily's wedding. "It's time for the father-daughter dance," the wedding coordinator announced, her clipboard clutched professionally against her chest. "Mr. Sullivan, are you ready?" Ready? How could anyone be ready to dance with their daughter, knowing that she had found a letter? That weathered envelope I'd written on the day she was born, containing the truth about her mother's death. A truth I protected her from for 25 years. Emily appeared in her white gown, looking so much like her mother that it made my chest ache. The same honey blonde hair, the same graceful way of moving through a crowd. She had grown up hearing stories about how Sarah had died shortly after childbirth. A tragic but simple narrative that had shielded her from the crushing weight of what really happened that night. "Daddy," she smiled, reaching for my hand. "You look pale. Are you okay?" I forced a smile, trying to ignore the slight bulge in her dress pocket where I knew the letter was hidden. "Just emotional, sweetheart. It's not every day I give away my little girl." The dance began, a gentle waltz that Sarah and I had danced to at our own wedding. As we moved across the floor, I could feel the eyes of every guest upon us, including those of Sarah's family, who had never quite forgiven me for what they believed was simple negligence on the night their daughter died. "You know," Emily said softly as we danced, "I always wondered why you kept all of Mom's old letters, but never let me read them." My step faltered slightly. "Some things are better left in the past, Emily." "That's what you always said." She looked up at me with Sarah's eyes. "But then I found the letter you wrote to me, hidden in Mom's old jewelry box." The music continued, but my world stopped spinning. That letter had been my confession, written in the raw hours after Sarah's death when guilt and grief had threatened to consume me. I'd hidden it away, intending to destroy it, but never quite finding the courage. "Emily, whatever you read." "The toasts are starting soon, Dad." She cut me off gently. "And I have something I need to say." The dance ended, and I watched helplessly as my daughter walked away, that letter burning a hole in her pocket. Around us, guests were taking their seats for dinner, champagne glasses being filled, cameras ready to capture what should have been simple, joyful wedding toasts. James, my new son-in-law, stood first. He was a good man, a pediatric surgeon who looked at Emily the way I had once looked at Sarah. His toast was everything it should be: funny, touching, full of promise for their future together. Then Emily stood, smoothing her white dress with trembling hands. The envelope emerged from her pocket, and I felt my heart stop. "When I was growing up," she began, her voice clear and strong like her mother's, "my dad always taught me that the truth was sacred. That no matter how difficult or painful, honesty was the foundation of love." The room was silent now, 200 people leaning forward slightly, drawn in by the emotion in her voice. Sarah's parents, sitting at the family table, exchanged confused glances. 25 years ago, on the day I was born, my father wrote me a letter. A letter he never intended me to find, but one that fate put in my path last month when I was going through my mother's things. I closed my eyes, remembering the words I'd written in that hospital waiting room, my hands shaking with guilt and grief. "My dearest Emily, by the time you read this, if you ever read this, I will have lived with this truth for many years. The night you were born, the night your mother died, wasn't the simple tragedy everyone believes." Emily's voice cracked slightly as she opened the envelope. What I found wasn't just a letter. It was a confession, a love story, and a truth that changes everything I thought I knew about my family. Sarah's father stood up abruptly, his face ashen. He had been the most vocal about my supposed negligence that night, never knowing the real reason I hadn't been at the hospital when Sarah began hemorrhaging. Emily. I started to rise, but she held up her hand. Please, Dad. For 25 years, you've carried this alone. Let me share the weight now. The letter trembled in her hands as she began to read. Asterisk, my dearest Emily, the night you were born was the best and worst night of my life. Everyone believes I was simply late getting to the hospital, that if I had been there sooner, your mother might have survived. But the truth is more complicated and far more painful. That night, I was at the research lab where I worked as a medical researcher. Your mother knew I was working late. We had agreed it was important I finish the drug trial I was supervising. What no one knew was that I had discovered something wrong with the trial data, something that suggested the drug we were testing was dangerous. I had just found evidence that my supervisor had falsified safety reports, pushing through a medication that could harm thousands of people. When your mother called to say she was in labor, I was in the middle of copying files that would expose the whole thing. I had a choice to make: destroy the evidence and get to the hospital, or stay and secure proof that would stop a dangerous drug from reaching the market. Your mother, my beautiful, ethical Sarah, would have wanted me to do the right thing. So I stayed, knowing the backup copies would take another hour. But something went wrong. Your mother's labor became complicated. By the time I got to the hospital, asterisk. Emily paused, tears streaming down her face. The room was absolutely silent. My father chose to save thousands of strangers instead of being with his wife. The drug trial was exposed, the medication never reached the market, and countless lives were saved. But he lost the love of his life in the process. Sarah's mother was crying now, understanding for the first time why I had been late that night. The truth that had haunted me for 25 years was finally out in the open. For 25 years, Emily continued, my father let people believe he was simply negligent. He accepted their judgment and anger, never defending himself, never revealing that he had chosen to be a hero at the cost of his own happiness. I couldn't stop my own tears now as my daughter turned to face me. Dad, I found more than just your letter last month. I found Mom's journals, including her last entry the day I was born. She wrote about how proud she was of your ethical standards, how she knew you would always choose to do the right thing, no matter the personal cost. The silence in the ballroom was deafening as Emily walked toward me, still holding both letters, my confession and Sarah's final journal entry. Mom wrote something else that day. Emily continued, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. If anything happens to me, tell our child that their father is the kind of man who would sacrifice everything to save others. That's why I fell in love with him. Sarah's father, Robert, stood up shakily. For 25 years, he had led his family in blaming me for his daughter's death. Now the truth was rewriting 2.5 decades of grief and anger. The drug trial, he said hoarsely. It was the Jensen Miller heart medication, wasn't it? The one that was pulled before release. I nodded slowly. They estimated it would have killed thousands with its side effects. The falsified data hid those risks. My brother, Robert's voice cracked. He was part of the target demographic. He would have been prescribed that medication. The weight of this revelation rippled through the room. Sarah's family had spent years grieving their daughter while unknowingly benefiting from the choice that had kept me from her side that night. Emily turned to address the guests again, her white dress catching the light like a beacon. But that's not the end of the story. Dad, show them what you did with Mom's life insurance money. My hands trembled as I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out a worn folder. For 25 years, I had kept this secret too. Not out of shame, but because Sarah would have wanted it this way. The Sarah Sullivan Foundation, Emily announced, taking the folder from me. Established anonymously the day after Mom's funeral. Dedicated to funding ethics oversight in medical research. 25 years of ensuring no other researcher would have to choose between saving one life or thousands. James, my new son-in-law, stepped forward to stand beside his bride. As a doctor himself, he understood better than most the weight of such choices. The Foundation has prevented 12 potentially dangerous drugs from reaching the market, he added. It's considered the gold standard in research ethics. No one ever knew who funded it or why. Sarah's mother was openly weeping now, decades of misdirected anger crumbling in the face of truth. All these years, while we blamed you. I let you, I said quietly. Your anger was easier to bear than explaining why I wasn't there when Sarah needed me. Emily opened the folder, revealing newspaper clippings and reports spanning 25 years. Every time the Foundation stopped a dangerous trial, Dad would add the article to this folder. He was carrying out Mom's last wishes, protecting others, no matter the personal cost. The wedding coordinator hovered uncertainly at the edge of the room, her timeline in shambles as this unexpected drama unfolded. But some moments transcend planning. Some truths demand their own time. There's more, Emily continued, pulling out another paper. 3 months ago, when I found Dad's letter, I also discovered something else. Mom knew she had a high-risk pregnancy. Her doctors had warned her about the possibility of complications. My head snapped up. This was something I hadn't known, a piece of the puzzle that had been missing for 25 years. The night I was born, Mom wrote 2 letters. One to Dad, which was never delivered, and one to me. Emily's voice shook slightly. Mom knew there was a chance she wouldn't survive. And she made a choice too. The letter in Emily's hands was one I had never seen, written in Sarah's elegant handwriting. Asterisk, my dearest child. If you're reading this, then my fears about tonight were justified. Your father doesn't know I'm writing this. He has enough weight on his shoulders with the trial he's overseeing. But I need you to understand something about love and sacrifice. Your father is the most ethical man I've ever known. Tonight, he's working late to protect people he'll never meet. If something goes wrong with my labor, I know he'll blame himself. Don't let him. I chose to have you despite the risks, just as your father chooses to stand up for what's right despite the costs. That's what love really is, being willing to sacrifice everything for what matters most. If I don't survive tonight, know that both your parents made choices born of love. Your father's love for humanity, my love for you. Tell him I understood. Tell him I would have made the same choice. All my love. Mom asterisk. The ballroom erupted in muffled sobs. Sarah's final words, hidden for 25 years, had finally found their audience. So you see, Emily said, turning back to me, Mom knew. She understood. And she was proud of you, Dad, just as I am. I stood on shaking legs, crossing the floor to embrace my daughter. In her, I saw everything good about Sarah, the strength, the compassion, the unwavering moral compass. There's one more thing, Emily whispered in my ear. Look at the date on Mom's letter to me. I glanced at the paper, and my world shifted again. The letter was dated 3 days before that fatal night. She knew about the problems with the drug trial, Emily explained softly. She found your research notes at home. That's why she didn't call you immediately when the labor started. She waited as long as she could, trying to give you time to gather the evidence. The revelation that Sarah had known, had deliberately given me time to expose the drug trial, hit me like a physical blow. For 25 years, I had carried the guilt of choosing strangers over my wife, never knowing she had helped make that choice. Sarah's brother, Michael, a pharmaceutical executive himself, stood up. I remember that trial, he said, his voice rough with emotion. It would have been fast-tracked for approval if the evidence hadn't come out. The projected market was enormous. 2 million patients in the first year alone, I confirmed. The mortality rate in the hidden data was nearly 4%. The mathematics of that night suddenly became clear to everyone in the room. 80,000 lives potentially saved by those crucial hours I spent gathering evidence. Sarah had understood the stakes even before I did. Emily touched the locket at her throat, the one that had been her mother's. When I found these letters last month, I also found this. She opened the locket, removing a tiny folded paper. A note Mom wrote to Dad, never delivered. My hands shook as I took the small paper, unfolding it carefully. Sarah's handwriting, still as fresh as the day she wrote it, read, Asterisk, my darling. If you're reading this, something has gone wrong. Don't blame yourself. We both know what's at stake tonight. I'm so proud of you for standing up for what's right. That integrity, that unwavering moral compass, it's why I fell in love with you. Take care of our baby. Tell them about tonight not as a tragedy, but as a testament to love. Love for family, love for humanity, love for truth. I made my choice. You made yours, both born of love. Forever yours, Sarah Asterisk. James stepped forward, taking Emily's hand. As a doctor, he understood the weight of medical ethics in a way few others could. The Sarah Sullivan Foundation's guidelines are required reading in medical school now, he said. Every life saved by those protocols is part of Sarah's legacy. Sarah's parents approached slowly, 25 years of misplaced blame visible in their posture. Why didn't you tell us? Her father asked. All these years, we thought. Would it have made losing her easier? I asked quietly. Knowing she died while I was exposing corporate fraud, that we both chose principles over personal safety. Yes, her mother said firmly, because that was Sarah, always fighting for what was right, no matter the cost. Emily took the folder of newspaper clippings, spreading them on a nearby table. Headlines spanning 25 years told the story of lives saved, dangerous drugs stopped, and medical protocols improved. Every year on Mom's birthday, she explained to the gathered guests, Dad would anonymously donate another $1 million to the foundation. Not just to honor her memory, but to continue her work, protecting others, standing up for truth. The wedding photographer had long since abandoned any pretense of following the schedule, instead documenting this unexpected moment of healing and truth. The posed family photos would have to wait. Some moments demand to be captured as they unfold. I found something else, Emily continued, pulling out her phone. The Foundation's work led to the Safe Trials Act of 2015. Dad, would you like to know how many lives that legislation has saved? I nodded, unable to speak. The CDC estimates 147,000 people are alive today because of improved trial protocols. She paused, letting that number sink in. That's Mom's legacy. That's what your choice that night made possible. Sarah's brother cleared his throat. The pharmaceutical company, Jensen Miller, they never knew who exposed the trial fraud, did they? No, I admitted. The evidence was submitted anonymously. They eventually paid a fine and restructured their research division, but they never knew the full story. They know now, James said quietly. The CEO is my uncle. When Emily found the letters, I told him. That's why the foundation received that $100 million donation last month. I stared at my new son-in-law, understanding dawning. The mysterious donation that had made headlines in the medical community had come from the very company whose fraud I had exposed. They want to rename it, Emily added softly, the Sarah and John Sullivan Foundation for Medical Ethics. Mom's story deserves to be known. The weight of 25 years of silence lifted as the truth finally found its voice. Sarah's choice, my choice, Emily's discovery, all threads in a tapestry of love, sacrifice, and redemption. I have one last surprise, Emily said, turning to face the room. James and I aren't going to the Maldives for our honeymoon. Instead, we're going to Geneva, to the World Health Organization's Conference on Medical Ethics. We're presenting the Sullivan Protocol, a new standard for clinical trials that Dad has been developing for the past 2 decades. 1 year after Emily's wedding, We gathered again in the same ballroom. This time, it wasn't for a wedding, but for the official launch of the expanded Sarah and John Sullivan Foundation for Medical Ethics. The guest list had changed significantly. Alongside family members sat pharmaceutical executives, medical researchers, and ethics board members from around the world. Emily, now visibly pregnant with my first grandchild, stood at the podium. Her work implementing the Sullivan Protocol had earned her international recognition in the medical ethics community. More importantly, it had given purpose to her mother's sacrifice. A year ago, in this room, we uncovered a truth that had been hidden for 25 years, she began. Today, we're here to ensure that no medical researcher ever has to choose between saving one life or thousands. James, standing beside her, added, "The Sullivan Protocol has been adopted by 17 major pharmaceutical companies. Every trial now has real-time ethical oversight. Every piece of data is independently verified." I watched from my seat, Sarah's last letter in my pocket, where I had carried it every day since Emily's wedding. The Foundation's new headquarters had Sarah's words engraved in its lobby, both choices born of love. Sarah's father, now the Foundation's board chairman, stood to make his announcement. Thanks to last year's corporate donations, we're establishing the Sarah Sullivan Scholarship for Medical Ethics. 10 full rides every year for medical students committed to ethical research practices. The changes of the past year had transformed more than just medical research. Sarah's family, after 25 years of misdirected grief, had found peace in understanding the full story. The anger that had colored every family gathering for decades had been replaced by a shared purpose, ensuring Sarah's sacrifice continued to save lives. "We have one more announcement," Emily said, her hand resting on her pregnant belly. "The WHO has officially recognized the Sullivan Protocol as the global standard for clinical trials." And she smiled, tears in her eyes. "James and I are naming our daughter Sarah." The room erupted in applause, but I barely heard it. In my mind, I was back in that hospital 26 years ago, making an impossible choice. Only now, the weight of that decision felt different. Sarah had known. She had understood. She had helped make that choice possible. "Dad," Emily called from the podium. "Would you like to say something?" I walked to the front of the room, pulling Sarah's letter from my pocket. After a year, the paper was worn soft, but the words remained clear, a testament to love that transcended time and tragedy. "For 25 years, I thought I had chosen strangers over my wife," I said quietly. "Now I know that Sarah and I made that choice together. Every life saved by this foundation, every patient protected by these protocols, they are all part of her legacy, part of our love story." The room fell silent as I continued. "Tomorrow, the Foundation launches its Global Oversight Program. Researchers anywhere in the world can submit concerns anonymously. No one will ever have to choose between conscience and career." Emily joined me at the podium, taking my hand. "And no father will have to carry such a burden alone," she added softly. As I looked out over the audience, medical professionals who would implement these changes, executives who would fund them, families who would benefit from them, I finally felt complete peace about that night 26 years ago. "Sarah used to say that love isn't just about grand gestures," I concluded. "It's about the choices we make every day to protect others, to stand up for what's right, to leave the world better than we found it." This foundation isn't just her memorial. It's her love, still saving lives. The Sarah and John Sullivan Foundation would go on to save countless lives, but its real legacy wasn't in the numbers. It was in the story of two people who chose truth over safety, principle over convenience, love over fear. And soon, a new Sarah Sullivan would enter the world, carrying forward her grandmother's legacy of courage and conviction. She would grow up knowing that love sometimes requires impossible choices, but those choices, born of love, create ripples that touch countless lives. As the evening ended, I stood alone on the ballroom balcony, holding Sarah's letter. After a year, I finally felt ready to add my own words to hers. Taking out a pen, I wrote, "My dearest Sarah, our choices that night saved more lives than we could have imagined. But your greatest gift wasn't in the lives saved. It was in showing us that love is strongest when it serves truth. Our granddaughter will carry your name and your spirit, and your love will keep saving lives, one truth at a time. Forever yours,